In the charming town of Maplewood, the stage was set for the most anticipated play of the year, until the leading actress vanished hours before opening night. Now, beneath the glow of the theater lights and the whispers of small-town secrets, a retired star must step back into the spotlight to uncover the truth hidden behind velvet curtains and smiling faces. This is The Case of the Missing Actress, a Hallmark-style mystery filled with intrigue, heart, and second chances. So grab your tea, settle in, and let the story begin. Maplewood was the sort of town where time seemed to stroll rather than run. The streets were lined with maple trees that painted the sidewalks gold in autumn, and the scent of coffee from Harper's Corner Cafe always mingled with the faint notes of piano drifting from the community theater. On weekends, children rode their bikes past the square, while shopkeepers leaned in doorways exchanging stories about weather, business, and everyone else's business. For Evelyn Hart, Maplewood had been a refuge, a soft landing after decades under bright lights and velvet curtains. Once a celebrated actress known for her poise and dazzling presence, she had retired quietly to this small town 5 years ago. Her old house on Birch Lane, with its creaky floors and wisteria-wrapped porch, was now her sanctuary. She had traded the applause of crowded theaters for the quiet applause of morning birds. But some lights refused to stay dimmed. This autumn, the Maplewood Community Theater was reviving The Winter Masquerade, the same play that had made Evelyn famous in her youth. The town was alive with anticipation. Posters had gone up around every lamppost, and the local paper had run an entire spread titled "Broadway Comes Home." Evelyn wasn't performing, of course, but she had agreed to act as mentor and consultant for the production, a gesture both nostalgic and generous. The new leading lady, Leila Monroe, was a spirited young actress from out of town, bright, ambitious, and eager to prove herself. Evelyn had taken a liking to her. There was something endearingly raw about Leila, a nervous sparkle behind her confidence. The girl reminded her of herself long ago, just before fame had taught her that adoration and loneliness can be twin shadows. On the eve of the premiere, the theater hummed with energy. Costumes rustled, the scent of sawdust and perfume mingled in the wings, and the stage lights blazed warm gold across the velvet curtains. Evelyn watched from the front row during the final rehearsal, noting every detail, a misplaced prop here, a missed cue there. But what mattered most, she thought, was heart, and tonight the cast had plenty of it. After the curtain fell, Evelyn rose and clapped, her elegant hands still graceful despite the years. "Splendid, all of you," she said warmly. "Leila, that final monologue, it gave me chills." Leila beamed, flushed with pride. "Thank you, Miss Hart. I just hope tomorrow goes as well." "It will," Evelyn assured her. "You have what most never learn: sincerity. The rest comes with time." As the others began to disperse, Evelyn lingered, gathering her shawl. Across the stage, she noticed Detective Daniel Reed leaning casually near the doorway. He wasn't in uniform, off-duty perhaps, but he had that same observant stillness she remembered from their first meeting last winter when he'd investigated a string of petty thefts at the antique shop next door. He caught her eye now and smiled faintly. "Didn't expect to see you at a dress rehearsal, Detective." He shrugged, his voice a low, calm timbre. "My niece on the lighting crew. I got roped into carrying cables." "Ah, so even heroes of justice can't escape the demands of theater." His smile widened just a touch. "You underestimate the power of stage managers." Their banter lingered in the air like a note of music that refused to fade. Evelyn found herself oddly comforted by his presence, the steady contrast to the flutter of pre-show nerves around them. Later that night, as the rehearsal wrapped, Evelyn stopped by the dressing rooms to wish everyone luck. Leila's door was slightly ajar. She heard the younger woman humming, then speaking softly, perhaps on the phone. Evelyn hesitated, not wanting to intrude, But just as she turned to leave, Leela's voice trembled faintly. "No, please, not tonight. I told you I can't do this anymore." There was a pause. Then the sound of the phone snapping shut. Silence. Evelyn frowned, a chill whispering through her calm composure. When she knocked lightly and peeked in, Leela was sitting at the vanity, brushing her hair, her expression perfectly composed again. "Everything all right, dear?" she asked gently. "Oh, yes, just a bit of stage fright. You know how it is." Evelyn did, but something about the tension in Leela's shoulders told her this was no ordinary nervousness. The next morning, the town square buzzed with excitement. Opening night banners fluttered, the bakery displayed masquerade cookies shaped like little masks, and Harper's Cafe was offering a winter masquerade latte. It seems the whole town had dressed up for the occasion. Evelyn stopped by the theater around noon to check in with the stage crew. Everyone was busy preparing, except Leela. Her dressing room was empty. Her costume hung untouched. By the late afternoon, worry began to ripple through the cast. Calls went unanswered. Her apartment, just a few blocks away, showed no sign of her. At 5 p.m., the theater manager found something on the vanity table in Leela's dressing room. Her script, its final page marked with a dark, rust-colored stain. Evelyn's heart sank as she stepped forward, her hand trembling slightly. She recognized that color too well, the metallic sheen, the way it darkened at the edges. Daniel Reed arrived minutes later, his expression grim but steady. "We'll find her," he said quietly. Evelyn met his gaze, the echo of old courage stirring within her. She had faced crowds, critics, and loneliness, but never this. Somewhere in the quiet streets of Maplewood, under the calm perfection of small-town life, a truth was hiding. And Evelyn Hart, though she hadn't set foot on a stage in years, knew she was about to perform the most important role of her life. The theater had never felt so still. Only hours earlier, laughter and excitement had filled the halls, but now the building seemed to hold its breath. The stage lights were dimmed, the curtains drawn, and faint echoes of hurried footsteps still lingered in the rafters. Evelyn stood near the vanity where Lila's belongings remained. A single brush, a half-empty perfume bottle, and the blood-stained script that had already begun to dry at the edges. Detective Daniel Reed crouched beside it, examining the pages carefully under the pale glow of a desk lamp. His manner was calm, efficient, but Evelyn could see the tension behind his measured movements. "You're certain this is her script?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes," Evelyn said softly. "I watched her write notes in the margins just yesterday. She always used a purple pen. Look, here." She pointed to the familiar, looping handwriting in the corner. "Remember, Act 3. Fear is not weakness." Daniel nodded, jotting something in his small notebook. No sign of forced entry, nothing else out of place. Evelyn's eyes drifted over the dressing room. Neat, almost too neat. "That's strange," she murmured. Lila was many things, but organized was not one of them. Her mirror was always cluttered with notes and trinkets. Could someone have cleaned up? Not her, not before opening night. Daniel straightened, meeting her gaze. "We'll search the area, check security footage from the square, but..." His voice softened, almost reluctant. "That stain, it could be blood. We'll know more after the lab runs it." Evelyn's hand tightened on her shawl. "You think something's happened to her?" "I think," Daniel said carefully, "that we can't rule anything out." Outside, rain had begun to fall, soft and steady, painting the theater windows with a silver sheen. It was the kind of rain Maplewood hadn't seen in weeks, as if the sky itself sensed unease. Evelyn turned toward the small table in the corner, where a bouquet of white roses lay half-wilted. A note card was tucked among the stems. She leaned in. The handwriting was bold, elegant, and unfamiliar. "Break a leg tonight, darling. You'll need it." No signature. Daniel joined her side, his brows furrowed. "That was delivered yesterday, according to the florist," he murmured, glancing at the label. Paid in cash. Evelyn felt a chill trace her spine. Not exactly a friendly message. No, he agreed, but not necessarily a threat either. Not if you don't know theater. Evelyn looked up at him. But we do. There was a quiet understanding in that moment, the shared recognition of a phrase that had lived too long on stage, where superstition and symbolism entwined. Break a leg was meant to be good luck, yes, but you'll need it? That was different. Daniel carefully bagged the card. We'll trace where the order came from. As he worked, Evelyn's gaze caught on the edge of the vanity mirror. Something small glimmered beneath it, a torn scrap of paper caught between the frame and the glass. She pulled it free gently, her heart quickening. It was a fragment of a photograph. The torn corner showed part of Lila's face and another person's hand resting on her shoulder. A man's, judging by the size. A ring gleamed on his finger, a distinctive gold band shaped like intertwined vines. Evelyn passed it to Daniel. Does this mean anything to you? He studied it carefully, frowning. Not yet, but I'll ask around. Maybe one of the locals will recognize it. Evelyn hesitated, watching the rain blur the world beyond the window. Detective, may I ask something? Of course. What if she didn't disappear on her own? What if she was taken? He didn't answer right away. His silence said enough. After the initial search, the theater was sealed off for the night. The cast and crew, worried and weary, gathered at Harper's Cafe down the street. Whispers buzzed through the air like restless bees. Maybe she ran away. Maybe she had cold feet. Maybe it's all a stunt. Evelyn sat at a corner table, staring into her untouched cup of tea. She could hear the young stage manager Maggie trying to reassure everyone. Lila's probably just stressed. She'll show up before the curtain tomorrow, you'll see. But Evelyn wasn't convinced. She looked up as Daniel entered the cafe, rain still glistening on his coat. He spotted her and walked over, pulling a chair beside her without asking. Mind if I sit? Please, she said, grateful for the quiet steadiness he brought with him. I checked her apartment. Nothing looked disturbed, but I did find a packed overnight bag, hidden under the bed. Evelyn blinked. You think she was planning to leave? Maybe, or someone wanted it to look that way. Their eyes met, her calm, amber brown against his cool gray. There was something unspoken in that moment, an understanding that went deeper than logic. After a pause, Daniel said, You've seen people hide things before. Secrets have a way of showing themselves to you. Evelyn gave a soft, wistful smile. That's because I spent my life pretending to be other people. You learn to notice what others hide. He studied her for a moment longer, then nodded thoughtfully. Then maybe you can help me. She raised an eyebrow. Help you? He said, I know this town, but I don't know the theater. Not the people, not the rhythm of it. You do. You can read them better than I ever could. Evelyn hesitated. She had sworn she would never get involved again, that her life of drama and danger ended with her final curtain call. But something inside her, some old ember of purpose, flickered awake. All right, she said finally, but only until we find Lila. Daniel smiled faintly. I'll take that. The clock struck 9, the rain softened, and outside the cafe window, the theater lights glowed faintly through the mist, empty now, yet somehow alive, as if waiting for the next act to begin. Evelyn sipped her cold tea, her mind already spinning through the script's lines, the cast's faces, the notes' cruel words. Somewhere amid the glamour, fear, and gossip of Maplewood's theater revival lay a truth, one written in ink, in secrecy, and perhaps in blood. And Evelyn Hart, once the queen of the stage, was about to return to her role, not as the actress this time, but as the one who would uncover the truth behind the case of the missing actress. The next morning dawned gray and quiet, the kind of stillness that seemed to muffle even the birds. The Maplewood Community Theater stood solemn against the fog, its once cheerful posters now damp and curling at the edges. The marquee lights flickered weakly, as if unsure whether to announce the show or the scandal. Evelyn Hart arrived just after 8, her coat buttoned tightly against the chill. The building was locked, but she could see the faint movement of figures through the frosted glass. Detective Daniel Reed and a few officers, moving with deliberate care. He opened the door for her. "Morning, Miss Hart." "Detective," she greeted, offering a polite nod. "Any news?" "Nothing yet. We searched the nearby park and the Riverwalk. No sign of Lila. Her phone's off, her car's still parked behind the theater." Evelyn stepped inside, the familiar scent of stage dust and old wood washing over her. "Then she didn't leave on her own," she murmured. Daniel didn't respond, but she saw the flicker of agreement in his eyes. They began their morning by interviewing the cast and crew, a mix of local talent, small-town dreamers, and volunteers who had all been drawn to the glamour of Maplewood's biggest event in years. Yet now, that glamour had soured into tension. First up was Tom Bishop, the play's director, a wiry man in his 50s with round glasses and a tendency to gesticulate dramatically, even when nervous. He sat across from Evelyn and Daniel in the green room, wringing his hands. "I swear Lila was fine yesterday," he said, voice shaking. "Excited, maybe a little anxious, but she didn't seem scared. She's been under pressure, sure. Opening night jitters, gossip about her and the producer, but nothing like this." Evelyn's brow lifted slightly. "Gossip?" Tom sighed. "You know how it is in small towns. People talk. Lila and Gregory Miles spent a lot of time together. He financed most of this production, and some of the cast didn't take kindly to her getting special treatment." Daniel made a note. "Was their relationship personal?" Tom hesitated. "That's what everyone assumed. But between you and me," he lowered his voice, "I think Gregory was more interested in control than companionship. Lila didn't like that." Evelyn's mind flicked back to the night before. The tremor in Lila's voice during that phone call, the words, "I can't do this anymore." When Tom left, Daniel exhaled quietly. "Control," he muttered. "That sounds like motive." "Or heartbreak," Evelyn said softly. "In theater, those two are often the same." Next, they spoke to Maggie Green, the young stage manager. She was barely 20, all nervous energy and ink-stained fingers. She clutched her clipboard like a shield. "I just want her to be okay," she said, eyes brimming. "Lila was nice to me. She'd bring me tea during rehearsals, told me stories about her auditions in the city. She said she came here for a fresh start." Evelyn leaned forward gently. "Did she ever tell you what she was starting over from?" She bit her lip. "Not exactly, but once when we were cleaning up, she dropped her purse. A photo fell out. Her and some man. They looked happy, but she snatched it up before I could say anything. She said, 'That was another life,' and changed the subject." Daniel's eyes met Evelyn's, both remembering the torn photograph they'd found the night before. "Did you notice anything strange yesterday?" Daniel asked. Maggie nodded slowly. "Yes, she got a phone call during rehearsal. Afterward, she seemed shaken. She left early, said she needed air. I thought she went to the cafe, but when I stopped by later, no one had seen her." Evelyn thanked her, her mind already turning over the fragments like pieces of a script. A mysterious caller, a controlling benefactor, a secret past, and now a missing actress. By noon, the interviews had painted a picture of not one culprit, but an entire stage full of masks. Everyone had a reason to want Lila gone, or at least silenced. Daniel stood by the stage, flipping through his notes. "We've got tension between the producer and the lead, rumors of an affair, jealousy from other cast members, and a mysterious phone call before she vanished." Evelyn joined him, her gaze sweeping the empty seats. "The perfect recipe for a tragedy, but I don't believe she's dead." Daniel looked at her, surprised. "You don't?" "No," she said quietly, her eyes distant. "A woman about to start over doesn't disappear, she hides." He studied her, intrigued by the certainty in her tone. "You think she's in hiding?" "I think she's afraid. and someone wanted her to stay that way. Just then, one of the officers approached, holding a small evidence bag. "Detective, we found this behind the stage near the prop storage." Inside was a delicate silver locket smeared with dust. Evelyn's breath caught. She recognized it instantly. Lila had worn it every day, a simple heart-shaped pendant she said was her good luck charm. Daniel opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph. The same man from the torn picture, smiling with Lila, and behind the photograph, faintly scratched into the metal, were two initials, G.M. "Gregory Miles," Daniel said quietly. Evelyn nodded, her expression unreadable. "The benefactor." A silence settled between them, thick with implication. "Let's pay Mr. Miles a visit," Daniel said. As they stepped out of the theater, the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm light across Maplewood streets. A deceptive calm, the kind that made everything look almost perfect again. But Evelyn Hart knew better. The stage might be empty, the script unfinished, but the next act had already begun. Somewhere between truth and performance, someone in Maplewood had written a part they couldn't control, and now the retired actress who thought she'd left the spotlight was about to take center stage once more. The drive to Gregory Miles' estate wound through the quiet edges of Maplewood, where the neat rows of cottages gave way to wide, manicured lawns and wrought iron gates. The morning fog had lifted, but the air still felt heavy, as if the whole town was holding its breath. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat of Daniel Reed's car, her gloved hands folded neatly in her lap. The locket with the initials GM lay in an evidence pouch on the dashboard, its presence between them like an unspoken question. Daniel glanced at her. "You knew him, didn't you?" "Gregory Miles?" she asked, her tone mild but tinged with memory. "Yes, years ago. He sponsored one of my last productions before I retired. Charming, persuasive, and utterly obsessed with appearances." Daniel gave a dry half-smile. "That sounds about right. He liked to surround himself with beauty and control it," she added quietly. "Women like Lila were drawn to him at first. He had a way of making people feel seen, until he decided they'd served their purpose." Daniel nodded, making a mental note. Evelyn's insight wasn't just intuitive, it was experienced. They arrived at Miles Manor, a stately colonial home with white columns and a circular drive lined with roses, perfectly pruned. The kind of house that screamed reputation. A butler led them through a gleaming hallway filled with oil portraits and awards. Everything smelled faintly of lemon polish and pride. Gregory Miles appeared in the study, tall, silver-haired, handsome in a deliberate sort of way. His smile was controlled, his handshake firm. He wore success like a costume. "Detective Reed," he said smoothly, "and Miss Hart, it's been far too long. To what do I owe this early visit?" Daniel spoke evenly. "We're following up on Miss Lila Monroe's disappearance." Gregory's expression didn't change, but his eyes flickered. "A dreadful situation. I've already spoken to the station this morning. I told them everything I know." Evelyn tilted her head. "Perhaps you could tell us again. Sometimes details are clearer in familiar company." He hesitated, just a second too long. "Of course," he said, gesturing toward two chairs. "Lila was a talented woman, though temperamental. She had dreams bigger than this town could handle." "Dreams you help fund," Daniel noted. Gregory's smile tightened. "I invest in local art. It's good for the community. Lila's success reflected on all of us." Evelyn leaned forward slightly. "You gave her more than funding, though. You gave her a locket, silver, heart-shaped." His eyes flicked to her, then away. "A gift. For luck." "Luck doesn't usually come engraved," she said softly. He met her gaze, a long, silent challenge. "Is that what you think this is, Evelyn?" Some kind of scandal? I think, she replied gently, that you don't give something that personal without expecting something in return. The air shifted. Daniel took out the photograph they'd found, the torn image of Lila and the same man smiling together. He placed it on the table. Gregory's hand twitched ever so slightly. Where did you get that? It was in her dressing room. Care to explain? His jaw set. That picture was taken 2 years ago in New York. She and I were friends, that's all. She left abruptly, without warning. When she resurfaced here, I helped her rebuild her career. I owed her that much. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Owed her? Why? He hesitated, again. Because she was my daughter's best friend. Lila was there the night my daughter died. The room went still. Daniel's pen paused mid-note. I didn't mention it earlier because it's painful. My daughter, Isabel, was in the same acting program as Lila. They were inseparable until the accident. Evelyn studied him. His grief looked polished too, but the faint tremor in his hand betrayed something real beneath the varnish. Lila blamed herself, Gregory said. I think that's why she came here, to make peace with it. She used to visit Isabel's grave often. Daniel exchanged a glance with Evelyn. This changed things. When they left Miles Manor, the sky had clouded again. The day's warmth had faded, replaced by a cool wind that rustled through the trees. Evelyn spoke first. He's hiding something, Daniel. Guilt, perhaps, or resentment. But that story about his daughter feels half true. Daniel nodded. Agreed. And if Lila knew something about that accident, that might explain why she vanished. As they reached the car, Evelyn paused, her eyes drawn to the manor's window. For a fleeting second, she thought she saw a curtain shift and the outline of a woman's face watching them. But when she blinked, it was gone. Daniel followed her gaze. What is it? Nothing, she said softly, though her pulse quickened. Just a shadow. They drove off down the long driveway, gravel crunching under the tires. Neither spoke, both lost in thought. Behind the window of Miles Manor, a young woman lowered the curtain, her eyes wide with fear. And around her neck, glinting faintly in the dim light, hung a second silver locket. The Maplewood Cemetery lay on the outskirts of town, where the trees grew tall and the ground sloped gently toward the river. In autumn, it was strangely beautiful. Soft amber leaves blanketing the headstones, sunlight slipping through the branches like memory made visible. Evelyn Hart had not set foot here in years. She had attended countless farewells on stage, each marked by applause and tears, but real endings, the kind carved in stone, always left her uneasy. Today, though, she felt drawn here not by grief but by something else. Clues had a way of whispering from the quietest places. Detective Daniel Reed parked near the iron gates and glanced at her. Gregory said she visits his daughter's grave often. If that's true, someone might have seen her here. Evelyn nodded, fastening her coat as the wind picked up, or left something behind. They followed the narrow gravel path through the cemetery, their footsteps soft against the hush. Marble angels watched from their perches, faces serene and distant. After a few turns, they found the grave they were looking for. Isabel Miles, 1994-2021, forever in the light. Fresh flowers, white lilies, rested at the base. Someone's been here recently, Daniel murmured. Evelyn crouched down, brushing away a few fallen leaves. Lilies, Lila's favorite. She mentioned once in an interview that they reminded her of purity and second chances. Daniel looked around. So she came here. Maybe even the day she disappeared? Evelyn's gaze drifted across the nearby headstones. She was hiding something, Daniel. Not just from Gregory, from herself. He studied her face. You sound like you knew her." "In a way, I did," Evelyn said quietly. "Lila reminded me of myself at her age, full of light, desperate to please, terrified of fading too soon." There was a moment of silence between them, one that spoke of shared understanding. Then Daniel's voice softened. "You didn't fade, Evelyn. You just changed stages." She smiled faintly. "You always did have a way with words, Detective." Before Daniel could reply, a voice broke the stillness behind them. "You're looking for Lila Monroe?" They turned. An older man stood a few rows away, the cemetery caretaker, dressed in a weathered coat, leaning on a rake. His eyes were sharp despite his age. "Yes," Daniel said, stepping closer. "Detective Reed, Maplewood PD. You've seen her." He nodded slowly. "A few times these past months. Always came early, before anyone else. Sat by the grave, talked to the girl like she was right there beside her." "Did she come here recently?" Evelyn asked. The caretaker frowned, thinking. "The day before she vanished. Drove up alone, stayed near an hour. Looked upset when she left, like she'd seen a ghost." "Did anyone else come by?" Daniel pressed. The old man's gaze shifted toward the far path. "A car showed up not long after she left. Dark green sedan, out-of-state plates. Didn't recognize the driver, but I saw him standing by the same grave." Daniel jotted that down. "Can you describe him?" "Tall, dark coat, moved like he knew this place, like he'd been here before." Evelyn's pulse quickened. Could it have been Gregory Miles? The man shook his head. "No, younger, maybe mid-30s. Looked troubled." As they thanked him and walked back toward the car, Evelyn's mind raced. A stranger visiting Isabel's grave right after Lila, a connection that couldn't be coincidence. "Whoever that man was," Daniel said, sliding behind the wheel, "he's our next lead." Evelyn turned the locket over in her hand, its metal glinting softly in the light. "I don't think he's a stranger," she murmured. "Something about that photograph, the one of Lila and the man. His face wasn't entirely visible, but his build." Daniel frowned. "You recognize him?" "I'm not sure, but I've seen him before. Maybe years ago during my last production in the city." "An actor?" "Possibly, or someone who wanted to be one." They sat in thoughtful silence as the car rumbled back toward town. The road wound through golden fields, the kind of landscape that looked peaceful from a distance, but closer inspection revealed the tangled roots beneath. As they passed the old bridge over Willow Creek, something caught Evelyn's eye. A flash of light from below, as if sunlight had struck metal. "Stop the car," she said suddenly. Daniel braked, following her gaze. Together, they climbed down the small embankment toward the creek bed. There, half buried in mud, was a woman's shoe, elegant, scuffed, and undistinctly stage-worn. Evelyn picked it up gently, her heart thudding. "She was here, Daniel." "And not alone," he added, pointing to faint tire marks leading away from the creek. Evelyn looked out over the rippling water, her expression grave. Someone wanted her to disappear, but the past has a way of resurfacing. As they climbed back to the road, the first chill of dusk began to settle over Maplewood. Behind them, the wind stirred through the cemetery, and somewhere among the gravestones, a figure watched from the shadows. By the time Evelyn and Daniel returned to the Maplewood Police Department, the sun had dipped low, painting the sky in soft streaks of peach and lavender. The day's discoveries, the grave, the shoe, the caretaker's description, had deepened the mystery into something that felt less like a disappearance and more like a reckoning. Inside, the scent of coffee and paper filled the small station. Officers moved about quietly, aware of the tension surrounding the case. Daniel's desk was already cluttered with evidence bags, photos, and a map of Maplewood dotted with red pins, each marking a clue that didn't yet fit. Evelyn stood beside him as he pinned up the latest photograph, the silver locket, now open, revealing Leela's smiling face beside the shadowed figure of the man whose identity still eluded them. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "I've sent the photo to forensics to see if we can pull a clear image of his face, but if he's not in any records, we might be out of luck." Evelyn studied the photo. "He's not from here, that's for certain. But his presence, it doesn't feel random." Daniel glanced up, curiosity in his eyes. "You said you might have seen him before?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "Yes, years ago, during my final season on stage in New York. He wasn't part of the cast, but I remember him lingering after rehearsals. He said his name was Michael Dane, an aspiring actor. He used to come around with Isabel Miles." Daniel froze mid-note. "Gregory's daughter?" "Yes. She was taking workshops then, hungry for recognition. Michael was her friend, or maybe more. I remember thinking they looked inseparable, the kind of closeness that burns bright but never lasts." Evelyn's voice softened, tinged with melancholy. "And then the accident happened." Daniel leaned back in his chair, the connections forming in his mind. If Michael was with Isabel before she died, and now we have evidence he was at her grave the day Leela vanished, then whatever happened back then is happening again. Before Daniel could respond, Officer Jenkins appeared at the doorway, holding a folder. "Detective, the lab enhanced the photograph you submitted. You're going to want to see this." Daniel took the printout and laid it flat on the desk. The image had been sharpened. Leela's face was clear, smiling under sunlight, and beside him, the man's features were now unmistakable. "Michael Dane," Evelyn breathed. "It's him." Daniel scanned the accompanying report. "Former theater student, left New York 5 years ago. Minor arrests for trespassing and disorderly conduct. Last known address, a rented cabin outside Maplewood." Evelyn felt a chill. "He's here." They drove out toward the edge of town, where the roads narrowed and the trees grew thick again. The woods were whisper quiet, the last light filtering through the branches like faded memory. The cabin stood alone at the end of a gravel path, its windows dim. A car, dark green sedan, just as the caretaker described, sat half hidden behind a thicket of bushes. Daniel cut the engine and turned to Evelyn. "Stay in the car." She met his gaze steadily. "You know I won't." He almost smiled, shaking his head. "Didn't think so." They approached quietly. The porch creaked under their weight. Daniel knocked once, hand near his holster. No answer. He tried the door, unlocked. Inside, the air smelled of dust and stale coffee. The room was small but tidy, lined with shelves of old playbills and scripts. On the table lay a framed photo of Isabel Miles, her eyes bright and full of life. Evelyn's attention was drawn to something pinned on the wall, a collage of newspaper clippings, theater posters, and photographs of Leela Monroe. Some were from her recent performances, others from years ago, long before she'd come to Maplewood. This isn't just admiration, it's an obsession. Daniel's jaw tightened. And motive. From the back room came the faint sound of a floorboard creaking. Daniel signaled for silence. They moved carefully down the short hall, the light dimming with every step. At the end of the hall stood a half-open door. Daniel pushed it gently and froze. The small bedroom was nearly empty, save for a single chair and a folded blanket on the floor. On the dresser sat an open notebook filled with handwriting, chaotic, emotional, frantic. Evelyn read aloud. "She said she forgave me, but I saw it in her eyes. She remembered. Isabel's gone because of me. Leela promised she'd keep my secret, but then she wanted to tell him, tell Gregory, and I couldn't let her." Her voice trailed off. The next page was stained, as if by water or tears. Daniel's face hardened. He's confessing. Before Evelyn could reply, the floor creaked again, this time directly behind them. They turned to see a figure standing in the doorway. It was Michael Dane, older, unshaven, his expression wild and hollow. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low. "You don't understand." Daniel raised his hand calmly. "Michael, we just want to talk." "She wanted to forgive me," he said, staring past them, eyes glassy, "but she couldn't. None of them could." Evelyn stepped forward slowly, her tone soft, coaxing. "Michael, what happened to Leela?" He swallowed hard. She wanted to tell the truth. About that night, about Isabel. "I begged her not to," his voice cracked. "I just wanted her to stay quiet. But she ran. I tried to stop her. She slipped." His voice broke entirely. "I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to." Evelyn's heart clenched. Daniel moved forward carefully, handcuffs in hand. "Where is she now, Michael?" Tears streamed down his face. "I couldn't leave her there. I brought her somewhere safe, somewhere she loved." "Where?" Daniel pressed. Michael looked at Evelyn, eyes full of regret, of ghosts, and whispered, "The theater. She's still at the theater." Before either of them could react, he bolted through the back door into the woods. Daniel ran after him, shouting his name, but the night swallowed the sound. Evelyn stood frozen, the words echoing in her ears. "She's still at the theater." The Maplewood Community Theater sat shrouded in silence when Evelyn and Daniel arrived, its once bright marquee dark against the moonlight. The building loomed like a sleeping giant, its grand archways and faded red brick glowing faintly in the pale silver glow. Somewhere inside those walls, the echoes of applause, laughter, and whispered lines had long been replaced by something heavier, a secret buried beneath the stage boards. The old theater door creaked as Daniel pushed it open. Dust motes swirled in the beam of his flashlight, dancing like restless spirits. Evelyn followed closely behind, her pulse quickening as they stepped into the familiar darkness of the auditorium. Rows of empty seats faced the stage, like a silent jury. "It feels colder in here," she murmured, rubbing her arms. Daniel swept his light across the stage. "The power's off. No one should be inside." But as he spoke, a faint rustle echoed from above, a whisper from the catwalk, or perhaps the wind through the rafters. Evelyn's instincts prickled. He said she's still at the theater. If Michael meant that literally, Daniel nodded grimly, then this is where we find her. They moved carefully down the aisle, each step hollow on the old floorboards. The curtain was still drawn halfway, revealing the edge of the set for Moonlight Masquerade, the play that never opened. The painted backdrop, a starlit ballroom, looked ghostly in the half-light. Evelyn climbed the short steps to the stage, the familiar boards creaking beneath her weight. Memories flickered. Her first performance, the smell of stage paint, the thrill of stepping into character. But tonight, the stage felt like a graveyard of forgotten dreams. Daniel examined the side wing where props were stacked haphazardly. This place hasn't been cleaned in weeks, no sign of anyone living here. Evelyn's eyes fell on the trapdoor at center stage, the old access panel used for stage effects. "Daniel," she said softly, pointing, "when I performed here years ago, that door led to a storage space beneath the stage. We used to call it the underworld." Daniel approached, crouched, and tested the latch. It groaned, but gave way. The smell of damp wood and dust rose up. He shone his flashlight into the darkness below. "What's down there?" Evelyn asked. "Looks like old props, boxes, and—" "Wait." His voice dropped. "There's something else." He descended the narrow ladder, boots scraping against the old wood. Evelyn hesitated, then followed. The air was cold, heavy with the scent of mildew and age. Their flashlights caught glimpses of forgotten scenery flats, broken mannequins, and shelves of costumes long abandoned. Then Daniel's beam settled on something at the far corner, a blanket covering a shape too deliberate to be debris. He crouched and pulled it back. Beneath it lay a wooden trunk, its brass hinges tarnished with age. A small lock dangled uselessly from the latch, already broken. Evelyn's breath caught. "Daniel?" He lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped carefully in a faded shawl, lay Lila Monroe's costume, the gown she was supposed to wear the night she vanished. Beneath the fabric, a glimpse of pale silk and the unmistakable outline of a body. Evelyn turned away, pressing her hand to her mouth. "Oh, dear God." Daniel exhaled, steady but shaken. "She's been here all along." For a long moment, the two stood in silence, the reality of it pressing in. Then Evelyn noticed something glinting at the edge of the trunk, a small golden charm shaped like a crescent moon. She picked it up gently. "Her necklace," she said. She never took it off. Daniel looked around the confined space, jaw set. Michael must have brought her here, said he wanted her somewhere she loved. He hid her in the one place that meant everything to her and to Isabel. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. It wasn't malice. It was guilt and madness. Daniel nodded somber. "We'll call it in, but there's one thing that still doesn't fit." Evelyn turned to him. "What's that?" "The caretaker said he saw Michael here after she disappeared, recently. So why come back if he'd already hidden her?" Before she could answer, a sudden noise echoed above, a thud from the stage level, followed by the faint scuff of footsteps. Daniel's flashlight swung upward. "Someone's here." They climbed back up quickly, emerging into the cold theater air once more. The lights flickered, briefly, impossibly, as if someone had thrown a switch. On the stage, under the dim glow of the emergency light, stood Gregory Miles. His face was pale, eyes red-rimmed, a revolver trembling in his hand. Evelyn froze. "Gregory?" He looked at her, expression haunted. "I didn't kill her," he said hoarsely. "I didn't, but I knew." Daniel took a careful step forward. "Put the gun down, Gregory. We can talk." "She came to me that night," Gregory continued, his voice cracking. "Lila, she said she'd found out the truth about Isabel's death, that Michael was to blame. I told her to let it go, that it was too late to dig up the past. She left in tears, and when she disappeared," he lowered his gaze, "I thought she ran away. I wanted to believe that." Evelyn's heart ached at the sight of him. This man who had once been the lifeblood of Maplewood's stage, now hollowed by regret. "Gregory," she said gently, "you didn't kill her, but you can help her now. Let the truth come out." His hand trembled, and finally, the gun clattered to the stage floor. Daniel moved quickly, securing the weapon, while Gregory sank to his knees, sobbing softly. Outside, sirens began to wail in the distance. Evelyn stood still, the enormity of it settling in. Lila's story, her final act, had been hidden beneath the very stage she adored. The theater had held it secret, waiting for its curtain call. And now, at last, the truth had taken the spotlight.
The morning after the discovery felt unreal, as if the whole town had been caught in a dream and was only now beginning to stir. Maplewood streets were unusually still. The old theater stood behind yellow tape, guarded by silence and the hum of distant traffic. Evelyn Hart sat on the back steps of the Maplewood Cafe, a steaming cup of tea warming her palms. She'd been there since dawn, watching the first light spill over the rooftops. Her thoughts were tangled, grief, relief, disbelief, all weaving through the quiet rhythm of the waking town. Detective Daniel Reed found her there, looking exhausted but calm. His tie hung loose, his jacket draped over his arm. "You've been up all night," he said gently. Evelyn offered a faint smile. "Old actresses don't sleep well after closing night." He took a seat beside her. For a moment, neither spoke. The sounds of clinking dishes and distant chatter filled the air between them. "They've confirmed it," Daniel said at last. "Lila Monroe died from head trauma, accidental most likely. Michael confessed she slipped during an argument backstage. He panicked, thought no one would believe him, so he hid her under the stage. He said she wanted to be remembered there. Her sanctuary, he called it. Evelyn's eyes glistened. Tragedy always seems to find the stage, doesn't it? Even off script. Daniel looked at her, his expression soft. You gave her a voice again. Without you, she would have just been another name lost in a headline. She was more than a name. She was a woman who wanted a new beginning, and the stage was supposed to give her that. I know what it's like to crave a second act. The silence stretched again, filled with something unspoken, an understanding that neither of them needed to define. After a long pause, Daniel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded document. For what it's worth, Gregory Miles gave this to me before he was taken in, said it was meant for you. Evelyn hesitated, then unfolded it carefully. The paper was yellowed with age, the handwriting elegant and trembling. It wasn't from Gregory at all. It was from Isabel Miles, his daughter who had died 5 years earlier. Her breath caught. Isabel? The letter was addressed to her father. If anything happens to me, know that I forgive you. The stage has always been bigger than both of us. It consumes what we give it. Tell Evelyn that she was right. The truth always finds its way back to the light. Evelyn's vision blurred. She mentioned me? Daniel leaned closer. You knew her? Evelyn nodded slowly. Not well. She was just starting out when I retired. Ambitious, bright, full of promise. Gregory wanted her to stay away from the stage, but she was determined to prove herself. I tried to help her once, told her to trust her instincts, to follow the light rather than the applause. I never imagined she'd end like that. Daniel studied her expression. You think Gregory blamed himself? I think he never forgave himself. That letter, it wasn't just farewell. It was an absolution. He's been carrying that ghost ever since. He frowned slightly. You believe Lila's disappearance somehow ties back to Isabel? Maybe not directly, but Maplewood has a way of repeating its tragedies, old pain dressed in new costumes. Sometimes the past just waits for the right cue to step back into the spotlight. Daniel's gaze deepened with thought. We'll reopen the file on Isabel Miles. If there's truth still buried there, we'll find it. Evelyn smiled faintly, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. Be careful, detective. Some ghosts don't like their stories retold. He chuckled, though his eyes stayed serious. Then it's a good thing I have an actress to guide me through the drama. Her heart warmed at that, not just from his words, but from the quiet sincerity behind them. That afternoon, Maplewood gathered in the square. Reporters came and went, but the townspeople were the real audience, people who'd once whispered about scandal and now whispered about sorrow. Flowers lined the theater steps, and a small photograph of Lila Monroe rested at the center, framed by candlelight. Evelyn stood near the entrance, watching as the wind tugged gently at the ribbons tied to the railings. Daniel joined her again, a paper cup of coffee in his hand. Closure, he said softly. It's never as simple as people think. No, I agreed, but it's something. A curtain call of sorts. They stood in silence, side by side, as the evening sun cast the theater in gold. And yet, as Maplewood exhaled in relief, Evelyn felt a subtle unease, like an echo that hadn't quite faded. Something Isabel had written in that letter lingered in her mind. The truth always finds its way back to the light. She looked up at the marquee and whispered to herself, then maybe the play isn't over yet. The rain returned that night, soft, persistent, and oddly comforting, as though Maplewood itself was mourning. The rhythmic patter against the windows filled Evelyn Hart's cottage with a hush that felt almost sacred. She sat at her writing desk, a single lamp casting a warm pool of light over the objects before her. Isabel Miles's letter, a magnifying glass, and a small box of keepsakes she gathered from the Maplewood Community Theatre earlier that day. She had read the letter a dozen times, yet something about it still tugged at her, a whisper beneath the words.
Tell Evelyn that she was right. The truth always finds its way back to the light. At first, it had sounded poetic, sentimental even, but now the phrasing struck her as deliberate, a code between actresses. Isabel had always loved riddles, turning her secrets into performances no one else could decipher. Evelyn tilted the page under the lamplight. The ink shimmered faintly, uneven in places, as if water had once brushed against it, or invisible ink. Her heart skipped. She reached for her teapot, still warm from earlier, and carefully held the steam over the paper. Slowly, as if the past itself was exhaling, faint words began to emerge beneath Isabel's graceful handwriting. He made me change my will. If I resist, he'll ruin me. The theater belongs to him now. Evelyn's breath caught. The he. Could it be Gregory? But that didn't make sense. Gregory Miles had been devastated by Isabel's death, tormented by guilt ever since. He'd funded the theater in her memory, lived with her ghost in every curtain rise and fall. Unless he wasn't the man Isabel meant. Evelyn reached for her notebook, flipping through pages of scribbled notes and names from the investigation, and then she stopped on one, Michael Dane. He was young then, Isabel's understudy, ambitious, talented, and fiercely loyal, and he had resurfaced now, after Leela's disappearance, working quietly at the same theater Isabel once graced. The connection sent a chill through her. She picked up the phone and dialed Daniel Reed's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice rough from lack of sleep. "Evelyn, it's late. I found something in Isabel's letter. She mentions someone, a man who made her change her will, who took ownership of the theater." There was a pause. Gregory? I thought so at first, but the theater wasn't transferred to him until after her death. That means someone else held control before that, someone who might have profited from her downfall. Michael Dane, Daniel said quietly, connecting the dots aloud. He was Isabel's understudy back then. We checked his record. He left town right after her death, and then came back, years later, just in time to mentor Leela. Daniel's tone shifted, a low hum of realization. You think he killed Isabel too? I think, Evelyn said softly, that Isabel tried to warn me, and Leela found the same truth 5 years later. The next morning, Evelyn met Daniel outside the police station. The air was crisp and clean after the storm, the kind of morning that made Maplewood look picture-perfect again. But the tension in Daniel's posture betrayed the calm. He checked property records. You were right. The theater was temporarily transferred to a holding company owned by Michael Dane after Isabel's death. Gregory reclaimed it years later, probably never realizing the connection. Evelyn exhaled slowly. And now Leela's death ties them both together? Daniel nodded. We found Michael. He's being held in county custody. The psych evaluation's still ongoing, but he keeps asking to see you. Me? He said you'd understand what Isabel meant. A shiver traced Evelyn's spine. Then I'll go. Michael Dane sat in the small interview room, his hands clasped, his expression eerily calm. His once sharp eyes looked tired, haunted, yet oddly at peace. When Evelyn entered, he smiled faintly. You found the letter? Yes, she said quietly. Isabel's words, they led me here. He nodded slowly. She always trusted you more than anyone, but she didn't know how deep it went. What did you do to her, Michael? Evelyn's voice trembled, part sorrow, part anger. He met her gaze unflinching. Nothing she didn't already know was coming. Gregory wanted to save her career. I wanted to save her legacy. The theater was dying, Evelyn. She made me promise it would survive, no matter what. Her heart ached at the distortion of truth. You forged her will. I preserved her dream, he said simply. She belonged to the stage, even in death. Her stomach turned. And Leela, what about her dream? For the first time, his eyes flickered with something human, regret, perhaps. Leela wouldn't let the story stay buried. She found Isabel's journals. She knew I'd been there the night Isabel died. And when she threatened to tell the truth, he finished for her, softly. I begged her not to. She fell. It was an accident. But when I saw the blood, when I realized what I'd done, I couldn't lose her too. Evelyn swallowed hard. You didn't protect her legacy, Michael. You destroyed it. Theirs, yours, and the theater's. He looked down, a tear slipping down his cheek. Maybe, but the stage remembers. It forgives in its own way. Evelyn stood slowly, her heart heavy. Then let the curtain fall, Michael. It's time. Outside, the morning sun broke through the clouds, washing Maplewood in gold once more. Daniel was waiting by the car. Well, he asked softly. It's over, Evelyn said, though her voice carried the weight of unfinished grief. But Isabel was right. The truth always finds its way back to the light. Daniel studied her for a moment and then said gently, You know, for someone who swore she was retired, you've solved 2 murders in 1 season. A faint smile tugged at her lips. I suppose the stage isn't done with me yet. He smiled back. Then maybe you and I make a good act after all. Evelyn laughed, a quiet, wistful sound. Careful, detective. That almost sounds like a proposal. He grinned. Maybe it's just the beginning of Act 2. As they walked away from the courthouse, hand brushing against hand, the town of Maplewood slowly came alive again, shops opening, laughter echoing faintly down Main Street. Life, like theater, was moving on. But as Evelyn glanced once more toward the distant outline of the Maplewood Community Theater, she swore she saw a flicker of light behind its dusty windows, as if Isabel herself was taking one last bow.
The Maplewood Community Theater stood quiet again. The yellow tape was gone, but a single bare bulb now glowed on stage, the ghost light, its lonely halo keeping vigil over the darkness. In Maplewood, that light was more than tradition. It was protection. It kept the theater's spirits company between acts. Evelyn Hart stepped through the side door just as the sun slipped behind the hills. The air was cool, heavy with that familiar scent of sawdust and fading perfume. She had told herself she was coming only to collect her scarf and some forgotten papers, yet something deeper had pulled her back. Her footsteps echoed softly as she crossed the aisle. Dust drifted like memory through the beam of the ghost light. For the first time in weeks, she felt no fear, only a quiet reverence. She moved toward the stage, fingertips brushing the worn velvet curtain. "Hello, old friend," she whispered. A faint hum answered her, the low creak of rafters, the sigh of a draft, or perhaps something else. Then she saw it. On the front row seat, resting neatly on the faded red cushion, lay a single white rose. Its petals were perfect, fresh. Tucked beneath was a note in delicate handwriting. "For Evelyn, thank you for bringing the truth back to the light. I am." Her breath caught. Isabel Miles. For a moment, she stood utterly still, eyes glistening. The rational part of her mind reached for explanations. Perhaps Daniel, perhaps one of the stagehands playing a kind gesture. Yet, deep inside, something told her otherwise. She looked toward the balcony where she and Isabel had once waited for their cues all those years ago. The shadows seemed to shift, and in that half-light, she almost thought she saw her. Isabel, radiant as ever, smiling faintly before fading into the dark. "Goodbye, my darling," she murmured,
her voice trembling with tenderness. "Your story's safe now." A tear slipped down her cheek, but her heart felt strangely light, as if the theater itself had exhaled. Footsteps approached behind her. Daniel Reed emerged from the wings, jacket in hand. "I had a feeling I'd find you here," he said gently. Evelyn turned, smiling through her tears. "You're learning how my mind works." He smiled back, stepping into the glow of the ghost light. "I stopped by your place. When you weren't there, I guessed the lyric had called you back for an encore." She chuckled softly. "Seems it always does." He studied her expression. "You okay?" She nodded, eyes drifting toward the empty stage. "I think so. Isabel's at peace. Leela too." Daniel moved closer, his voice warm. "You did that. You gave them both their curtain call." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Funny thing about the stage, it gives us the courage to face what's real, even when the lights go out." They stood side by side, watching the ghost light flicker gently in its metal cage. After a moment, Daniel spoke again, his tone lighter. "I talked to the city council this morning. They want to reopen the Maplewood Community Theatre, restore it, maybe even dedicate the next season to Isabel Miles and Leela Monroe." Evelyn turned to him, eyes brightening. "Truly?" He nodded. "They asked if you'd help lead the revival, direct the first show." A slow, astonished smile spread across her face. "After all these years, the stage is calling me home again." He reached out, brushing a speck of dust from her sleeve. "Looks like Maplewood still has a few acts left for Evelyn Hart." She laughed softly, the sound echoing through the empty theater. "Then maybe it's time to stop hiding behind the curtain." Outside, the night deepened, and the ghost light burned on, steady, golden, eternal. As they left, Evelyn paused at the door and looked back one last time. The stage seemed alive again, waiting for its next story, and in that gentle glow, she whispered, "Thank you, Isabel. Thank you for the encore." The light flickered once, almost like a bow, and the curtain, at long last, came to rest. The Maplewood Community Theatre of Maplewood had never looked so alive. Golden bulbs framed its entrance once more, each one polished and glowing like a constellation reborn. A crimson ribbon stretched across the doors, flanked by flowers, laughter, and the scent of rain that had briefly kissed the pavement. The old marquee, lovingly restored, now read, "The Maplewood Community Theatre Returns," directed by Evelyn Hart. Inside, velvet curtains rippled softly as the crowd began to fill the seats. Townsfolk, local reporters, and faces Evelyn hadn't seen in years. The old forgotten theater was alive again, pulsing with the anticipation of opening night. Backstage, Evelyn Hart stood before a mirror, surrounded by soft bulbs, her reflection haloed in light. She wore a sleek black dress, with a hint of silver at the collar. Elegant, understated, timeless. Beside her lay a small white rose, pressed between the pages of the script she'd kept all these years, a quiet tribute to Isabel Miles. "5 minutes to curtain, Miss Hart," called a young stagehand. "Thank you, dear." Her reflection smiled back, older, wiser, but still carrying that unmistakable spark that once drew audiences to their feet. Only now that light felt different, grounded, peaceful. The door creaked open, and Daniel Reed stepped in, straightening his tie. He looked different tonight, too. Less detective, more man rediscovering life's warmth. He held out his hand. "I brought something for good luck." She turned, amused. "Are you superstitious now?" He grinned and opened his palm. "Nestled in one of the theater's old drawers, I found this tiny charm. A silver mask pendant. I thought it belonged with you." Her heart swelled. She took it gently, fingers brushing his. "Thank you, Daniel, for everything." "Evelyn," he said softly, "this theater wouldn't be standing if not for you." She smiled wistfully. "It's funny. I thought coming back here would open old wounds, but it turns out it healed them." Outside, the house lights dimmed. The murmuring crowd hushed into anticipation. Evelyn took one final look in the mirror, touched the pendant at her throat, and whispered to her reflection, and perhaps to Isabel's memory, "Let's give them a show." The orchestra swelled. The curtain rose. The performance, a new play titled The Final Curtain, written by Evelyn herself, began with a monologue about forgiveness and second chances. The lead actress, a young newcomer named Emily Wells, stepped into the spotlight, her voice trembling at first, then steady, alive. From the shadows of the wings, Evelyn watched, pride glimmering in her eyes. Every line, every gesture carried a piece of Maplewood's story of love lost, secrets unearthed, and the beauty of starting again. The audience leaned forward, breath held. At the end, as the final line was spoken, "Some ghosts stay, not to haunt, but to remind us we once belonged to something beautiful," the audience erupted in applause. A standing ovation shook the room. Evelyn stepped forward into the lights, joined by her cast. She bowed once, gracefully, tears shimmering like glass. The applause grew louder, echoing through her chest like thunder. And there, for the briefest heartbeat, she thought she saw Isabel Miles again, standing at the edge of the stage, no longer fading or sorrowful, but radiant, smiling proudly before vanishing into the glow. Later, as the theater emptied and laughter spilled into the night air, Daniel waited by the front doors. Evelyn joined him, carrying her coat and a quiet smile. "So," he said, "what does the retired actress turned sleuth do now that the curtain's closed?" She chuckled softly. "I'm not sure. Maybe direct another play. Maybe solve another mystery. Maplewood seems to have plenty of both." He tilted his head. "Would you consider some company along the way?" Her eyes met his, warm and steady. "Only if he promises to bring the coffee." "Deal," he said, offering his arm. She took it. They stepped out into the crisp night, the theater glowing behind them like a promise. Its lights reflected in puddles along the street, as if the stars themselves had come down to celebrate. For Maplewood, this wasn't just reopening night. It was a rebirth. And for Evelyn Hart, it was the start of a brand new act. Morning light streamed gently through the lace curtains of Evelyn Hart's cottage on Willow Lane. The air smelled faintly of coffee and wild lilacs drifting in from her garden. For the first time in a long while, the world felt still. Not because it was empty, but because it was full. On her kitchen table sat a stack of letters, invitations from small theaters across the county asking if she'd consider directing, mentoring, even starring again. Evelyn smiled, tracing her finger along the envelopes, but leaving them unopened for now. She wasn't running anymore, nor was she chasing anything. She was home. The soft chime of the front doorbell broke her reverie. Daniel Reed stood there, holding a bouquet of daisies, slightly uneven, endearing me so. "Detective Reed," she greeted with a teasing smile. "You're up early." He lifted the flowers. "Bribery. I was hoping this might earn me another one of your scones." She laughed. "Bribery accepted." They moved to the porch, where the sun painted golden threads across the garden. Evelyn poured him coffee, while the morning birds provided their own little symphony. Daniel looked at her over his mug. "You know, I still can't believe the theater's sold out for the next 3 weekends. The whole town's buzzing again." Evelyn nodded softly. "It's strange, all that pain, all those secrets, and somehow it brought everyone closer. Even Gregory Miles came by last night to donate to the theater fund." Daniel chuckled. "Guilt can be a powerful motivator." She smiled knowingly. "So can redemption." For a moment, they sat in companionable silence, watching the sun rise higher. Then Evelyn leaned back in her chair. "You ever think about what happens after the curtain call, Daniel? When the audience leaves, the lights go out, and it's just you and the echoes. He thought for a moment, maybe that's where the real story begins. Evelyn's eyes softened. That's what I've come to believe too. A light breeze stirred the pages of her notebook on the table, her new manuscript. Across the top, in her elegant handwriting, was the title, The Maplewood Mysteries by Evelyn Hart. Daniel caught sight of it and raised a brow. Writing about yourself now? She replied with a wink. About a small-town detective and a retired actress who keep stumbling into trouble, and, maybe, into each other. He grinned. Sounds like a bestseller. Their laughter mingled with the rustle of leaves, soft, easy, and alive, the kind of laughter that only comes when two people have walked through storms and found their way back to sunlight. In the distance, the bells from St. Mary's chimed noon. The world was moving again, bright, ordinary, beautiful. Evelyn stood, gazing out toward the town she had once tried to leave behind. You know, Daniel, she said quietly, I spent years chasing applause, thinking it meant I'd mattered. But this feels like the real standing ovation. He looked at her, really looked at her, and said simply, You deserve it. She reached for his hand and for once didn't pull away. Down the road, the sign for the Maplewood Community Theatre shimmered in the sunlight, its letters gleaming gold against the sky. A new play was already in rehearsal, this time starring a young actress with bright eyes and a dream, much like Evelyn once had. And as laughter drifted from the town square and children ran past with playbills fluttering in their hands, Evelyn Hart knew that Maplewood and her heart were exactly where they were meant to be. The curtain had fallen, but her story was only just beginning.
And so, under the quiet glow of Maplewood's lights, the final curtain falls. Not on loss, but on hope. Evelyn Hart found more than a mystery to solve. She found her way back to herself. And in that truth, perhaps we all see a little of our own story. Thank you, dear listener, for joining us through every twist, every whisper, and every heartbeat of The Case of the Missing Actress. If you felt the magic in this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the next tale that shimmers between mystery and emotion. Until our next story, stay curious, stay kind, and keep listening to the whispers between the lines.